it's like trying to swallow the ocean. It's like, there's so many things I want so many things. It's like, what do so I'm trying to pick something I'm have a little passion about. And basically what I wanted to get into tonight was kind of the difference between foolishness and wisdom, and how it really works down to today's society and what you see in the political scheme and on television and in the world around us, and how things have changed in the last 30 years. I think, if you've been around, you've watched television, the news, and just, as we would say, how things have slid down. Trying to talk about that, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the world has walked away from God. At least the elitists, the mainstream, have kind of walked away from God. So, like in 1 Colossians 3:16, it says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord." So, and if you go through Proverbs and Psalms, David and Solomon were really big on wisdom. It's like you just one after another as they talk about different versions of wisdom and knowledge, and getting with the Lord and getting your heart straight with things. And so, as I'm going to try and go through some of this stuff and try to relate it to today's world, and how, you could say it started back in the early 60s when they took Bible reading out of the schools. Well, it probably started earlier than that, when the earlier seminaries started skirting off to the. So it's been a long time coming, and now we're really seeing the fruits of it. Now you're about 3 generations away from that, and now it's really coming to full tilt nowadays, where you watch what's going on in schools and you go, oh my word. I'm glad I got my kids through had to deal with it, even though we even homeschooled. But I just pray for my grandkids, that's all. So, it used to be in the world, if somebody was caught in a scandal, it was devastating. It destroyed careers and everything else. And nowadays, it's like people not only have scandals, but they actually create scandals to get themselves notarized and publicity and get to become the focus in today's world, because people, they're so visual and they just want to, oh, look at this. And it's like you sit there and scratch your heads, you hear about, people in Hollywood, they complain about the fact that their nude photos got on the internet. Why did you have them to begin with? Well, it's like, if you you can't get them on if you don't have them to begin with. So it's like, it's kind of, and they grouse about it, but I don't know whether they're complaining or bragging, the way they're looking at things. It's like, because their hearts are so darkened. There's what you're seeing out there. It's you kind of sit back and scratch your head, and I could read a couple more in Proverbs where it kind of bounces between that and Peter about wisdom and foolishness. And when I talk about foolishness or fools, I'm not talking about people who are dim-witted. Okay, I'm talking about people who have, at least in the way the Bible defines fool, is somebody who is lack of moral character, lack of moral direction, as opposed to being mentally deficient. Mentally deficient, you can kind of excuse that. The moral side, you can't, because it's it's a choice. It is a choice, because you've decided not to do this and you've decided to do this way. So it's, people complain about it. It's kind of hard to have some empathy for them, what they're doing. And so, we still pray for them, and, but at the same time, it's like, how do you feel sorry for them at the same time? It's so it's called natural consequences, is another term for it. But when it says in Proverbs 1:7, you have the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And that's just, so what, I guess it was, I'm not sure who wrote first Proverbs, I'm going to guess Solomon, but I don't know. The fear of the Lord is where you got to start, okay, where you got to, there is an absolute ruler, there's absolute standards, and that's what you want to guide yourself with. And you look at people today, and they, there's relativism that you see today. It's like, what's good for you is not good for me, and that type of stuff. So then they sit there and they wander off and go do something, and it's like, then they whine and complain about it. So, well, what did you expect? It's like, and in Proverbs 4:18 through 19, but the path of the just is as a shining light that shineth more and more unto the perfect day. The way of the wicked is as of darkness. They know not what they stumble. Okay, and this really kind of shows what people are doing. I mean, they're doing things they don't even know they're doing them. That's how bad it's gotten. They think this is perfectly fine, and you sit there and go, I don't think so. But of course, if you tell them that, then you're judging them. So it's like you have to be careful that way. Okay, and I can go on with a number of different proverbs. The ways of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkens unto counsel is wise. And then of course you have the famous one in Romans, First Romans, and it starts. You start in 20 and 22 to 23, and then it starts going into about homosexuality and everything else turning. I don't know if I want to read the whole thing, but it's quite lengthy. But at the bottom you have, and even as they did not retrain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to their reprobate minds. Okay, so not only have they decided to walk away from God, but God is kind of, okay, you want it, you got it, okay, and kind of turns up the flame on them, okay, to try and trying to get them to understand, you really want that? Okay, I'll give it to you, and you'll get it. And so it goes on, do these things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malingery, whispers, backbiters, haters of God. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's all these things that we despise, and okay, you want that. Just like you take a look at elections and things like that, and people decide they won something. Okay, God, you want that? You want that guy really to run? Okay, here you go. You got him. Some people would say that's what happened the last, in 2008 and 2012. Okay, and then I don't know. I just trust in the Lord that He's putting the person in there He wants, and I just have to leave it at that. But yeah, because the more you see, the more it's like, oh, okay. But so it's one of these things. Now when you talk about the church itself, unfortunately, these walls don't protect us, and these and you can even go as far as our salvation itself does not protect us ourselves from wandering away from wisdom. I mean, you go through King David, man of God, loved God, prayed to God, wrote the Psalms and Proverbs. And what did he do with Bathsheba? Okay, and he knew better, but he did it anyway. Okay. Gene was just telling me, Christian comedian just today came out and said, I haven't been a good boy. I've been doing things I shouldn't have been doing. So now I don't, what's his name? John Crist. He's more aimed at more the younger people, and I'm sure you've heard of other, pastors or religious leaders that have had to go up and make and confess their sinfulness, and that's sad, especially for somebody who supposedly should know better. So it really should tell us that we really should be it's sometimes it's not good to stay away, but you also have to redirect yourself towards the Lord in the scriptures and prayer. That's your only protection, because the devil's looking for weaknesses. He's looking for openings. He's looking for something to give you to kind of push you in different directions. And I have to raise my hand. I got to be careful too. I have to say, I have to watch what I do. It's constantly redirecting my thoughts, redirecting where I should be going. And it's just, it's like, telling yourself, stop that, you're being stupid. Move on. And this goes back, I was going through and different things, and you take a look at churches today. I mean, the Protestant, a lot of the mainstream Protestants have long since, most of them are dividing between those who support homosexuality and those who don't. You've seen major schisms along that way. Even the Jewish denominations have long since split on a lot of that stuff. You've got your Orthodox, you've got your conservative, you've got your Reform, and a couple of different flavors in between. And it was interesting when I went to a bar mitzvah. It was a Reformed Jewish church. It was a Jewish synagogue, and it's interesting. I didn't hardly ever remember hearing anything of God there. It really, even when they brought out the Torah, I didn't hear anything about it. It was about doing good works. That seemed to be their major emphasis, doing good works. Yeah, okay, that's nice, but it's kind of empty. So that's, and then you read the New Testament where Christ was constantly berating the Pharisees about their own foolishness. They were looking on the outside and not on the inside. He was constantly taking them apart on that one, which just made him mad, because and that's part of the foolishness. Here you got the Christ standing there and berating them for where they are, and they couldn't understand what he was getting at. I mean, they talked, oh, he's from Nazareth, he's not trained, but the words were hitting them in the heart, and they knew it because they're getting mad. But it just wasn't sinking in. They didn't get it. Okay, so that's the danger of wisdom. And if you go through Proverbs and stuff about what they talk about, the wickedness, you people, you tell them. I say, where is it? I'm trying to think where it is. Anyway, should have added a few notes to that. Sorry for that. Anyway, he was talking about they were doing wrong and they were enjoying it. I thought I had it here. Yeah, it's one of the Proverbs. I might have had it here. I've read so many in doing this. I've read so much Proverbs and Psalms. It's like my head's starting to swim. But anyway, that's part of the problem of the curse of foolishness, is the fact you don't even know you're blind. You're doing what you're doing. And really the only way, it's tough to believe that you can even find your way out without some sort of outside intervention from God, somebody praying for you, or the Lord is simply in His grace and wisdom giving you some insights of what you're doing, and and I guess that's one reason why God turns you over, is the fact that I think there was talking about in Corinthians where Paul was talking about throwing some of the people who are doing things out of the church, so that they, turn them over to Satan, so that maybe in that they would realize what they're doing is wrong, and then maybe they'll come back and seek forgiveness. But Yeah, it could be. But there's a number of passages. If you really want to get into wisdom, what wisdom is about in Proverbs, particularly Proverbs 10, it just goes through wisdom and what you should be doing and what you should be looking at. A lot of Psalms talk, where they're talking about the foolishness of people persecute him and the wisdom of God. And that really is, and usually in a lot of your Bibles, where your Bible in a year, there's always a section of Proverbs and there's always a section of Psalms in them to always uplift you and keep that wisdom in front of you as part of your seek after that. So don't have a whole lot more after that. Now, the other thing is, I talk about wisdom, but don't confuse wisdom with knowledge. Okay, there's a difference between the two. My wife has a favorite saying, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting the tomato in a fruit salad. There's a big, okay. That's the difference. And it really drives home a point. I mean, a lot of people have knowledge, but wisdom is where you use it, and for a better life. Yeah, yes. A lot of people are sitting on the couch knowing, but they're not getting out and doing. So, anybody have any questions? Somebody's got to have questions. I got to have big holes in this thing.
What you're saying earlier about the schools, it just reminded me, our grandson Jeremy is struggling down in Maryland. When he was in Virginia, I guess they spoke kinder and the teachers were more involved. And then he came back up here, and the hardest thing for him is how the kids are talking.
Mm-hmm.
He's home and he hates having it in his head. That's the toughest thing he's had to do.
Well, you take a look at the demographics of where he was living before. He was in a much more southern portion of Virginia. I'm sure you would have the same problems up around Alexandria or around Washington, where it's much more elitism type of thing. It's just that, I guess it also comes down to the teachers themselves sometimes, and where their heart is. If they're Christian, or that sometimes has a way of it, it's light and salt, basically what it comes down to. Is that light and salt that they have in their testimony? They may not be preaching to God, but the way they deal with people has a lot to do with that. In Maryland, I guess in that particular school district, it's kind of dark. Okay. Yeah.
Comment, Bob and I had a fairly early dinner at McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around the time when the school kids were coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was observing there was a booth with 4 young girls.
Mm-hmm.
Each had their cell phones,
Mm-hmm.
not talking to one another.
Oh, they're probably texting to each other at the same place.
It just blew my mind that there was no conversation. All it is looking at their little phones. And
Well, this is a wonderful piece of technology. Okay, but like every technology, depending on where the heart is, that's where it's going to take you. And unfortunately, it takes you there faster than ever you could ever do before. That's the dangerous part about it. Yes, I got a nice Bible app in here, which I love a lot, but there's other places that can take you someplace else where you don't belong. So it really comes down to where the heart is, and where their hearts are too. Yeah.
After being in the school system for 31 years, the difference between the children today and the last 10 years or so, as to when I first started, it's night and day.
Mm-hmm.
Night and day. There's no respect in the schools, and the teachers are basically told, if somebody's finished the principal's office, you'll see them in the gym playing basketball with the principal because they're afraid of lawsuits and everything else. You can't say this to my child. It's unbelievable. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
So you, I mean, it's a horrible place to be for the kids.
I know. I pray for my grandkids because they're in the public schools. It says now, fortunately, down there they're a bit more conservative in that particular area, but even still, it's very metropolitan. You've got a lot of people from a lot of different areas where they are, as opposed to old Florida, where it might be a whole lot different. You know, and old Florida's only 20, 30 miles away from there. So, yeah.
To bear that out, I've got a friend that lives in Mount Airy, Maryland, which is near Frederick.
Mm-hmm.
And 25 miles, you're in downtown DC. And he said, you know, he got out of the Air Force and went back to the area where he grew up. In fact, he lives a mile from where he went to grade school. And he said, but the encroachment of Washington DC, because it's expensive to live in Washington.
Sure it is.
So people are moving out
Mhm.
on the Beltway out into that part of Maryland. He said you can actually see this tidal wave coming out. He said, and he's up in years now. He said, I hope I'm dead and gone by the time it gets here to Frederick,
Mm-hmm.
or Mount Airy. You know, he said it's not what it was. He said,
No, it never is. And it comes down to, I mean, this is fine. Our country's finally reaping the fruits of, you know, of gradually pushing the Lord out of the classrooms. I mean, starting back in the early '60s when the Supreme Court had the no more Bible reading in the classes and stuff like that, and it's chipping away ever since. And it's in some ways, I hate to say it's been good, but I think people took things for granted back then and relied on the government and other things to keep things. Now it's on them, and now we have to really get on our knees to the Lord and ask for a lot of help. Not.
I've been reading in Ezekiel, and the passage that I've been reading talked about how God set up Jerusalem and how he made Jerusalem such a fine place. And it talked about how he encrusted jewels and into the, you know, the expressive verbiage in that particular chapter. But then he talked about how when they turned away from God, those things that they had in Jerusalem, they started to sell off. They started to give it away. They started to turn it into idols and take those things. And it was just amazing to me to see that as Jerusalem, but as a country in the same token, because we had this wonderful country and we turned away from God, and those things that were so beautiful and so magnificent about our country. You know, we talk about different political leaders that have now made apology to us for our country. Well, our country was founded on Christian beliefs, and it's just interesting as I was reading it, the equating of our country with what God had originally planned for Jerusalem, and how when they turned away from God, how that all disappeared.
Yeah.
Same thing is happening here.
Well, I think if you read through the Bible, it's a constant theme over and over and over and over again. I mean, it's just the way man is, and they cycle. He takes them down to their knees, and they pray, and he comes back, and they get back up, and they wander off again, and God, okay, takes it out away from them. They get back down to the knees. I mean, that's what you see through the books of Kings and Chronicles. Yep. So. It's interesting because when we were down at Antietam, there was a pastor there who was talking about church going and everything else. Before the Civil War, church attendance was very low. You don't think about it, but apparently it was very, very low. And it was after the Civil War, with all the mayhem, that the church attendance really blossomed after that. So
that's when they put "In God We Trust" on the coin.
yeah, so
At that time.
yeah, so this is so we've been through this before ourselves. But
One of the commentators I listened to says that society goes ups and downs when it comes to
Yeah, well, you look at what happened, what you say about the 50s. What happened before the 50s? World War II. Okay, that had a major effect on a lot. It really shook a lot of guys to their core. I mean, they grew up in the farms, they grew up in the country, they grew up, and then a lot of them go to war and they go, whoa, wow, this is terrible. They got a whole new definition for terrible at that point. And that shakes you to your core.
I think it's interesting that black rapper, or whatever they call these people, Kanye,
Kanye West.
had the 6,000 people service, and they said 1,000 went forward now, or no, raised their hands.
With Kanye West, I'm willing to sit back and watch him and see what happens. Okay, if that's what it is, praise the Lord. If that's what it takes. If people get saved despite him, praise the Lord. Okay, Lord works in many different ways, and you just have to keep an open mind to that. He can work in ways that we were. I mean, it's funny because I think back in history where, everybody talked about how terrible the Vikings were, and, they ravaged and pillaged and plundered and everything else and took slaves back. Well, that's how they got saved. They took the Christian slaves back, and the Christian slaves took them back and converted them. St. Patrick, kidnapped in England, taken over to Ireland, learned the Irish ways, learned the Irish, customs, came back to England, and the Lord used them, sent them back, and converted the Irish. The Lord has many different ways of doing things.
Well, I never even heard of that guy until he came forth for Trump. I didn't know who
Kanye West.
that name. I didn't happen to know, but he's certainly come on the scene now.
Well, Kanye's had an interesting history, so that's why, okay, I'll sit back and watch him. What? Yeah. Yeah, really.
First Corinthians, first chapter,
Yeah.
there's a lot of discussion there about the wisdom of the wise,
Mm-hmm.
foolishness with God. That covers the subject we were on tonight.
Yeah, well, that's the book where 1 Corinthians 1.
Say, beginning at 19, for the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this world? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. For the Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom. That's a fact.
Okay. Prayers. Do we have any additions to the prayer?